Aloha. It's my pleasure to introduce my husband, Greg Maples. Before I met Greg Maples, my brother David would talk about Greg Maples, his young men's leader. He always had really great things to say about him. And I had no idea who he was, but one Sunday, I was attending church with a date, and Greg noticed me walking into sacrament meeting. He told my brother he could set me up with someone much better than that guy, and he ended up asking me out on a date, and we've been together ever since. We were sealed in the Dallas, Texas temple and have 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls, 8 grandchildren, and with 2 more on the way. For most of our marriage, Greg has held many leadership callings, and he currently serves as the Stake Young Men's president and the high counselor. Most of our kids grew up with their dad sitting on the stand, so I had to wrestle them a lot of the time. Greg served 6 years in the Marine Corps. He also served a full-time mission in the Canada-Toronto mission. He started his career in the food service industry, working at La Petite Boulangerie as a French baker. And he moved his way up from manager to district manager and area manager. One of the ways he was able to move up fast was his ability to produce long-lasting results. He would often get up early in the morning and have all his work done before anyone else started work. He relocated to Houston, Texas, working at Jack in the Box, where he built and opened 26 company-owned stores. His friend was a Sonic franchisee, convinced him it was better to be a franchisee than to work for Jack in the Box. So he left Jack in the Box to become a franchisee with Sonic Drive-Ins. While there, he grew the business from 8 to 80 stores in over 7 states. After selling the restaurants, he decided to pursue his lifelong dream to become a sheriff's deputy. Now, Greg's lifelong dream wasn't my lifelong dream, and it wasn't too exciting for me because every day he would be putting his life in danger. So I was really excited when he decided to go back into the food business, where he was the chief operating officer of Curry Development in Las Vegas, and that really thrilled me. And it also was very relieving because he was out of danger. Greg is great at leading, training, mentoring those around him. One of his favorite sayings is, "Performance is the equalizer." People love him and love to be led by him. He is the author of the blog mybubster.com, which tells his journey through the loss of our son David. He hopes to one day publish it into a book. You may have seen Greg around campus or at the Polynesian Cultural Center, not knowing he is the star of a viral video, Darth Vader versus Hoverboard, which has got over 750 million views worldwide and trended #1 on Reddit for 13 hours. It has also been featured on Jimmy Fallon, Ellen, The Jimmy Kimmel Show, and Good Morning America, as well as all over the globe. It also won the Video of the Year on Jimmy Kimmel for 2015. I thought I was going to have to take him to the hospital after that, but I guess he survived. One of the things I most admire about Greg is the fact that if he sets a goal, he doesn't stop until he reaches it. He set a goal to lose weight and get in shape by small racing goals. He started walking first, then he would run and walk, then he completed a 5K, then a 10K, then he went on to doing half marathons and marathons. He accomplished each goal before moving to the next race. He has become a half Ironman. Then he did Escape from Alcatraz, which he commented after he got out of the water, "Don't ever let me do that race again," because it was one of the toughest. He accomplished his ultimate goal of completing 3 Ironman triathlons, which include a 2.5-mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a full 20.62 marathon. His ultimate goal would be to do the Ironman Hawaii, which he would love to do. Greg loves to have fun and is well known in our family for his pranks. Our kids can tell volumes of stories where their dad has hid under their bed waiting to scare them, or waiting outside to jump out when they came home from a date, or a multitude of other stories. He loves to smile, laugh, and has been known for being approachable and kind. Greg has blessed so many people around him. I'm truly grateful to have such a great friend, husband, and father to our children. I love you, Greg. There you go.
My dear friends, aloha. I am so grateful for Trish and her unwavering love for me. I would happily go back and take that triathlete's body right about now. I need to get in better shape, obviously. Just last week, we celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary. It was unlike any that we had had in the past, for obvious reasons. She is the hardest working woman I have ever met. She is an example to me in so many ways. She is fiercely loyal and loving as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and daughter-in-law. She is a strong and capable woman and is not afraid of anything. I'm grateful to be by her side, especially in these that are trying and uncertain times. You know, I've often wondered what it would be like to speak at a BYU devotional. When I was asked to speak, my first thought was, oh boy, I sure hope somebody shows up. Well, my worst nightmare has happened. No one showed up. As you know, I'm speaking from the Cannon Activity Center. To support social distancing, the CAC is empty except for a few who are here to help me with the production of these proceedings. And to them, we say thank you. My friends, I testify to you that our Father in heaven and his beloved Son, Jesus Christ, live. That we are led by a living prophet, even Russell M. Nelson. You and I have seen the fulfillment of his prophecy, counsel, and direction to us personally and as a church collectively. I testify to you that our Father in heaven and his Son, Jesus Christ, know us. They know who we are, where we are, and what we are going through. They love us, and I promise we are not alone. In the April 2018 Sunday morning session of General Conference, President Russell M. Nelson said the following, quote, "Our Savior and Redeemer, Jesus Christ, will perform some of the highest, mightiest works between now and when he comes again. We will see miraculous indications that God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, preside over this church in majesty and glory. But in the coming days, it will not be possible to survive spiritually without the guiding, directing, comforting, and constant influence of the Holy Ghost. My beloved brothers and sisters, I plead with you to increase your spiritual capacity to receive revelation." Quote, close quote. It is my experience that as we live to receive personal revelation, we learn a powerful lesson. We learn that we are not alone. By the very fact that we are receiving revelation, it testifies to us that we are not alone and that he knows us and loves us. It tells us he is involved in the details of our lives. Let me demonstrate this by a story. On September 2nd, 2015, at 1 a.m. in the morning, our son Zach came into our room to tell us there was someone at the front door we needed to talk to. It was a woman from the Clark County Coroner's Office. She was there to tell us that our youngest son, David, had been killed in an accident on his way home from the gym earlier that evening. Her words shot through me. Pain, sadness, and desperation washed over me in a way I did not know was even possible. Our sweet 20-year-old baby boy was gone. From the very hour of receiving the news, the tender mercies of the Lord began. To this very day, our family has been the recipients of some of the most remarkable and personal tender mercies. I want to relate to a story that highlights the love and how merciful a father has been and will be to his children. Now, as I tell this story, pay attention to how many times the Lord intervened, all for the good of a few of his children. A dear friend of mine, Tim Morris, who was celebrating his 50th birthday, was having a surprise party. He lives in Heber City, Utah, with his wife and 2 adorable children. His wife had messaged me on Facebook and asked if I would be attending the party. The party would be 6 o'clock on a Saturday. After some thought and a look at my calendar, I told her I would be there. I had planned on driving up on Saturday morning to attend the party and then drive back on Sunday. Sometime during the week, I had a thought come to me. It would be a good idea to drive up on Friday. I had a few things I've always wanted to do in Salt Lake, and if I went up on Friday, I could do those things on Saturday before the party. So I decided I'd go up Friday night. On Friday, my day was going great. I got done at work just a little bit early and thought I would leave earlier than I had planned. I got home, started to pack a few things for the trip. Interesting, the wind that day was horrible. It was gusting 40 to 60 miles per hour and was just relentless. I had this feeling as I was in the house packing that I needed to go into the backyard and do some weeding. I thought to myself, are you kidding? Weeding? I'm not weeding. I'm leaving early. I'm headed out for a great weekend and I'm not going to stop and do some weeding. However, the feeling persisted, so I got my hoe and I got my rake and I headed to the backyard. I hoed about half of the yard and started to rake it up. I had a feeling come over me that said I had done enough and I could go. I cleaned up, got in my truck, and headed out on my trip. As I got close to St. George, Utah, I was going to stop, top off my tank, grab a drink, and then head on to Salt Lake. I had this feeling come over me. It said, you really don't need gas. You really don't need another drink. You can make it to Cedar. Just go on to Cedar City. It seemed reasonable, so I passed through St. George and headed on to Cedar City. About 10 miles south of Cedar City, I was driving in the right lane of the freeway. The speed limit there is 80 miles per hour. Very uncharacteristic of me, I was in the right lane doing 80 miles an hour with my cruise control set. For those who know me, know I wouldn't normally be doing just the speed limit. The feeling came to me to just stay in the right lane, put your cruise control on 80 miles per hour. So I did it. But at the time, I was very content with driving the speed limit, and I was just enjoying the drive. As I was driving, I noticed a couple on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle start to pass me on the left-hand side of the freeway. They both looked so happy. I remember thinking, look how happy they are. Trish and I, in a few months, are going to be empty nesters, and I hope we can find something together that is that much fun for us. They continued past me about 100 yards in front of me, and then the man began to make a lane change into the right lane of the freeway. Just as he did, a powerful gust of wind hit them. The bike began to wobble back and forth, known in the biking world as the death wobble. It was clear they were going to crash. Then the bike got close to the edge of the freeway, and the front tire turned all the way right, and it just stuck straight into the ground. The couple and the motorcycle were catapulted into the air at least 20 feet. I could not believe what I was seeing. The man and the woman were tumbling in the air, head over heels, over and over. The bike was doing the same thing. I saw all three of them hit the grassy area on the side of the freeway. It was a steep, sloped, grassy area. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over. When my truck stopped, I could see the man was directly to my right. The bike had hit the grass and was standing straight up like it was sitting on the kickstand. The woman was a bit further down the grassy hill, closer to the freeway. I jumped out of the truck and started to dial 911. I could see he was hurt badly. I ran to the man closest to me because I could see that he was hurt badly. I felt his neck for a pulse. I thought I felt a weak pulse, but I couldn't tell if it was him or the heartbeat and pounding in my fingers. It was just all happening so fast. I ran to the woman, his wife, and I could see she had at least a fractured leg. She was unconscious at the time, and I could see she was still breathing. Just as I leaned over to check on her, she woke up and tried to sit up. I gently pushed her down and told her, "Ma'am, you've been in a terrible accident, and you've broken a leg. I need you to lay down and not move." She then passed out, but I could tell she was breathing on her own. I ran back to the man and began to feel for a pulse. The 911 operator kept asking me if I could feel a pulse. I told her I thought I did, but I couldn't be sure. I felt his neck, his wrist. I even listened to his chest. The wind was howling and cars kept driving by. Because of the steep slope, no one could see us and no one would stop. I was all alone. I was kneeling by him and I tried to think of any way I possibly could, but it wasn't going to happen. As I was feeling for his pulse, it felt to me that his neck was broken. About that time, I saw a trooper in an unmarked truck pull up. He had seen the accident in his rearview mirror and turned around and drove back down the side of the freeway against oncoming traffic. I told the 911 operator that the trooper was there and I needed to let her go, and I hung up. I explained the situation to the trooper. I told him I thought the man was dead. I asked him to check for a pulse just to make sure. He did, and he felt nothing. I told him the woman was alive, but had at least a broken leg. He ran to her and began talking on the radio. I could hear him giving directions. He called for a life flight helicopter as well. Soon another trooper came. He and the other trooper tended to the woman and called in more info on the radios. I just knelt next to the man. The Spirit whispered to me to put my hands on his head and give him a priesthood blessing. However, it was made very clear to me that he was not coming back and that it was his time. He was dead. I gave him a priesthood blessing. I then took his left hand and I just held it. I put my hand on his chest and I just rubbed it. As I knelt there, I brushed the dirt and the grass off of him. I straightened his legs and made him look as comfortable as I could. I'd look directly above his head as if he were standing right there. I spoke to him out loud and I said, "I'm so sorry you died today. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry for your family and what they are about to go through. I promise you, I'm not going to leave you." I felt compelled to just stay next to this man. I looked in his wallet and found his name. I also learned that he was an off-duty sheriff's deputy from a county in central Utah. The first trooper that came walked up to me and knelt beside me and asked me if I was okay. I'm sure it seemed odd that I was just kneeling here holding this man's hand. I told him that I was fine. I explained that almost 8 months ago I had lost my son, our youngest son, who was 20 in a motorcycle accident. He gently said, "I'm sure this cannot be easy." The truth, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be at the time. I felt a great sense of calm. I was supposed to be right there, and I wasn't moving. The paramedics finally came. They came over to the man and asked me for an update. I told them that he was dead. They needed to verify, so they pulled up his shirt, put some EKG wires on his chest. They turned on the machine and within a few seconds looked at me and said, "Yes, sir, he is dead." They then pronounced the time of death. They quickly moved on to work on his wife. I asked one of the paramedics if they could get me a sheet so I could cover the man up to his chest. I was worried about his wife looking over and seeing only me kneeling next to him, and that might be upsetting to her. They brought me a sheet and I covered him up to his chest. The freeway was shut down and the life flight helicopter was trying to land in the horrible wind. They finally were able to land in the middle of the freeway. After they loaded the wife in the helicopter, I pulled the sheet up over his head and tucked it in all around him. I just knelt there and held the man's hand. I had no concept of time. Later, after recreating the accident, I realized I had been kneeling next to him for almost an hour and a half. One of the troopers came up to me and explained that he would need me to write a statement. Of course, I agreed. By that time, there were other troopers there, and I knew the man would not be alone. I told the troopers it was very important to me that he was not left alone at any time. They promised me that an officer would be standing by his side and would not leave him. I got out of the truck and walked up to the two troopers and gave them my statement. One looked at me and told me that he had heard about me losing my son and he was very sorry. He had tears in his eyes, and he went on to tell me that he even knew this man. He told me that the man's father was a retired Utah State Trooper and he had worked with him. I told him how sorry I was for him and for all of them, for all of the officers. My heart was breaking. He said I didn't have to leave, but that I had done more than enough, and that if I wanted to, I could leave. I made sure the sheet was secure and that he wouldn't be alone, and I got in my truck and drove off. I noticed that I had blood on my hands, and it had become sticky. I needed to wash my hands. I stopped at a TA Travel gas stop at the next exit. I went in, I washed my hands, I got a cool drink and filled my tank up. As I was walking around and gassing up, I kept looking at people and thinking, you have no idea what just happened. You have no idea what I just saw. You have no idea that a man's life had just ended. Those feelings from David's death came racing back to me. Before leaving Las Vegas, I had called our middle son, Zach, who attended BYU, Idaho. I told him I was coming up, and if he wanted to drive down and meet me, I would get a hotel room in Salt Lake, and we could spend Saturday together. I was grateful that Zach would be with me that night. I had the chance to do a lot of thinking on the remainder of that drive. The thought came to me that I thought about all the things that had to take place to put me in that exact place at that exact time. The man died in a motorcycle accident. David had died in a motorcycle accident. I was a sheriff's deputy. He was a sheriff's deputy. A man was with David and held his hand when he died. I was with this man holding his hand when he died. I thought about all it took to get me to that place at that exact time. Simply a miracle. As I was driving, I had the strong impression that I should somehow try to get in touch with his parents. However, I had no idea where they lived or how this could even happen. I tucked that thought away, but it never left. Zach and I had a great time together Saturday. We drove up to Heber City and with other friends and family joined the surprise party. While at the surprise party, I saw an old friend from Nashville I had not seen in years. I was telling him the story and how I felt. How I wanted to find his mom and dad. He looked at me and said, I think I know this family. He walked out to the garage and made a phone call. He came back in and told me that he had gotten the address to the mom and dad, and he immediately had texted it to me. I just stood there stunned. Again, what are the chances of all the people my friend would know, he would know this family and be able to get me their address? The next morning, Zach and I had breakfast together in the hotel, said goodbye, and he headed for Idaho. I had set my GPS for Delta, Utah. As I drove the 2 to 3 hours to get there, I thought I might be nervous meeting the family, but I wasn't. I was calm. When I arrived at their home, they were standing outside on the front walkway. They were talking to some friends who had come to visit. I stood on the sidewalk and politely waited until they were done talking and the other folks had left. I walked up to the man and asked him if he was Mr. Smith. He said he was. I said, Sir, my name is Greg Maples. I was the first one on the scene at your son's accident, and I was with him when he died. He was a big man, 6'4", and every bit a trooper. He looked down and said to me, You were? Yes, sir, I was. And I thought I would come by and talk with you. His wife came off the steps and said, You were with my son when he died? I told her I was, and they invited me in. They lived in a modest but nice home. We sat in the living room together. I told them who I was, and I told them about our son David and how he was killed. I told them that I would like to tell them the story of the accident. I explained that I could tell them all they wanted to know or as little as they wanted to know. I started to tell the story exactly as I've told you today. After a minute, the father began to cry. He said he had not cried since they got the news. However, he had only 2 questions that he wanted answers to, and no one could answer them. He had asked the troopers and the other sheriff's deputies, but none of them could tell him because they weren't there. The 2 questions were, did my son die alone, and did my son suffer? He said, you have come and answered both these questions. I was able to look him in his eyes and tell him, sir, your son was never conscious, he did not suffer, and he was never alone. I had never left his side. The emotion for me was palpable. This was a sacred moment. A few minutes later, a brother of the man killed pulled up and came into the home. He was a master driller, a good-sized man, and looked tough. His father told him to sit down. He told him who I was and that I should listen to him. As I told the story, he began to cry. He said he had just been talking to his wife on the phone and told her he had 2 questions that he had to have answered. Did his brother suffer, and was he alone? Once again, I was able to look him in the eye and tell him. It was another sacred moment. I told the mother that I had been impressed to give her son a blessing. I told her what I had said and what the Spirit had whispered to me about his death. She confided in me that the one thing she wanted was hoping for was that somehow her son had received a priesthood blessing. This sweet mother then leaned close to me and asked, Mr. Maples, does it ever get easier? With all the compassion I could muster, I told her, no, it doesn't. However, you will learn to live with it. You'll learn to get by and move forward. However, the pain is always there. I told them to look for the tender mercies the Lord would send. I promised them that they would come. I told them I know we are not alone, and He knows you and loves you. I learned during my visit that the wife of the man had a broken neck and several broken bones. She had already had 4 surgeries, and 2 of them that very day. She had a long, very long recovery ahead of her. She was a school teacher, and he was a sheriff's deputy. I got up, hugged the brother and the mother, and then I hugged the dad. I thought he was going to squeeze the soul out of me, and it felt good. I loved that man. I didn't know him, but I knew more about him in that moment than most of his family and friends ever will. I loved him. We said goodbye, and I started home. I drove in silence, just thinking about all that had happened. I just couldn't stop thinking about all that had happened and how it unfolded. I knew I was going to be different from this experience. It was going to change me for the rest of my life. In Doctrine and Covenants, section 88, it says, "For I will go before your face, and I will be on your right hand and on your left, and my spirit shall be in your hearts, and my angels round about you to bear you up." I testify that God is involved in the details of our lives. He loved this family enough to orchestrate all of these events just for them. I'm grateful the Lord was able to use me to help this family. I'm grateful for the Spirit that truly testifies of all things. My friends, these are uncertain times, I know. The world has changed across the globe in a matter of days. However, what has not changed is our knowledge that we are sons and daughters of a Father who loves us and is very much involved in the details of our lives. We have living prophets and apostles, and they are leading us and guiding us today. We are not alone. This is what I know for sure, and I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.